Bien, vamos a comenzar la segunda sesión. Antes de eso, quiero agradecer la participación de la OCDE, como decimos nosotros, que no solo mide la calidad de la educación de chicos de 15 años en distintas partes del mundo, sino que realiza un interesante trabajo en investigación educativa que yo creo que debe mantener una sinergia con el trabajo que hacemos en Unesco, porque son realmente complementarios. Los países que nos acompañan hoy están ubicados en los altos puntos de los rankings de PISA. En el global están primero Singapur, segundo Japón, tercero Estonia, cuarto Finlandia, noveno China. Es decir, que hay una categorización muy importante de todos los expertos que hoy están aquí, a quienes quiero agradecer especialmente a todos por su esfuerzo, su voluntad, su participación. Vamos a comenzar ahora con ese segundo bloque y voy a preguntar primero a Yuri Belfali, que es especialista en la medición de horas de enseñanza, es jefa de la División de Educación Temprana y directora de Educación y Habilidades en la OCDE, precisamente en la OCDE. Según, las mediciones varían, pero según muchas mediciones, el span of attention, es decir, el periodo de atención que puede tener un chico entre 6 y 7 años es 30 minutos y a los 10 años 50 minutos. Esto tiene que ver con la duración de las clases. Está contemplado que la clase no dure más allá del span of attention, o hay criterios que yo no estoy teniendo en cuenta.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I start, I'd like to congratulate Argentina and Unesco delegation for organizing this meeting, and thanks for inviting the OECD to be part of this discussion. As Ambassador mentioned, countries look at international comparison, and as French Minister mentioned, PISA is one of the assessment that we can look at, but sometimes countries just look at the ranking and overlook the interesting information that we can find behind the ranking. And it is very important to understand what we can find as a factors related to the good performance of different countries that you have cited, but also to understand in light of the different research about learning and teaching, so that we can reflect on what are the real challenges, what could be the possible solutions. So I hope that our conversation could be some feed into your reflection. I am not, saying that we could find the solutions out of this 1 hour or less than 1 hour session, but hopefully we can find a good questions to further explore. Another important point is that, yes, it is an interesting approach to look into the practices and policies of successful from the point of view of international assessment average scores, but at the same time, everybody might agree that the context of education systems matter. So what we discuss today and tomorrow is important, but at the same time, countries need to take into account your own context, own opportunities and challenges that you have in your systems, societies, and the cultures, and reflect on what could be or what might be the solutions to the challenges that you have, but what might not be in the context, specific context of your country. So with this caveat, I'd like to get into the question, and I try to answer, but at the same time, expand somehow the topic that you proposed, Mr. Ambassador. So yes, we have more and more research and knowledge foundations to understand the learning of children and young people. And we have rich informations to consider, but at the same time, in terms of the policy making, it's not so obvious. For example, the question that you ask, we know better than before how children's learning takes place, how children's brains, for example, function when they want to learn, acquire new knowledge, try to use the knowledge that they used, and timing is one of the important dimensions to be considered. To what extent children, depending on the age, can concentrate on or maintain the attention or stay motivated to learn. And of course, there's no clear, answers to any questions or to any issues. This is something very complex to reflect. But I would like to bring two contributions to this discussion. One is the time spent on learning. Whenever we talk about the students' outcomes, and when especially policymakers are very much pressured to rapidly increase the performance, like, okay, look at Singapore, we want to be like Singapore. So what they do very often is to increase the time for learning. If they want to increase the math average score, for example, sometimes they are, they have the pressure to increase the time spent for teaching math in schools. Or sometimes pressure goes to the downside of the educational levels. Why not starting very early instead of starting 6, 7? Why not starting at the age of 5, the mathematical learning? This is probably easy way to address the visible challenges, but not necessarily the best way, because you need to consider different dimensions related to the timing necessary and appropriate timing. Well, unfortunately, I cannot bring any answers, yes or no. There's no clear-cut conclusions out of the research, or we don't have any evidence what age, for example, children should start science learning or math learning, or how much time they should spend every day or for each subject or areas. But one piece of puzzle that I want to bring is that despite the myth of more time for learning, better learning, actually it is not the case if you see how countries are organizing teaching and learning and how they are performing. Well, unfortunately, OECD, for the moment, doesn't have the data to point out the issues of 6 and 7 years old, although we are now working a lot to develop the better data and understanding of the early age learning. But I will just give you an example of the timing issues out of the PISA study as an example. If you could show the slide 5, that could be helpful. As I'm from the OECD, without statistics, I'm like a fish without water, so I just want to use the visuals to explain my point. And click again, please, and another click. Yes. So don't worry if you cannot see the letters or the details, but just see the visuals. You can see on the left side countries which are spending relatively smaller amount of time for science teaching. This is at the age of 15. Please keep that in mind. Then on the right side, you would find countries which are spending longer time for science performance. For example, on the left side, you find, for example, Finland, Germany, Switzerland. Those countries are spending, for example, around 25, sorry, this is not science, it's the whole teaching time at the age of 15, around 25 hours per week in schools, and some additional out-of-school teaching time. Whereas on the right side, you can find the countries like, for example, Thailand or Qatar or Tunisia, which are spending in total more than 40 or 50 hours per week, including in school and outside of teaching. But at the same time, if you see the whole time spending for learning in schools and outside of school, and the performance, for example, in 2015, we gave a close look at the science performance, then you see the black dots, which means that to an extent, within the same amount of time spent, how much students are actually performing. So this means that countries on the left side are maybe using more efficiently, effectively, the limited time that you can use for teachers, for students. Or in another word, they are spending relatively shorter time in school and learning outside of the schools, but demonstrating a good performance. Whereas the countries on the right side, they are spending lots of time and even increasing the time of teaching, but that is not necessarily translated into the performance. And of course, we need to take into account, which is not in this chart, but other impact that the timing of teaching could make on students, like the well-being of students, whether students who are spending lots of time might be compromising their sleeping time or the time for play, time for socializations. This is also another issue. So this is very important to say the quality of the use of time and how teachers, schools, parents, and students use the given time matters more than just mathematically add more time for teaching. Second and last point that I want to raise is that Ambassador mentioned the point of the concentration, attention time for children, but what kind of attention they need to give for what kind of activities. If you see different countries, and that's what we will hear more in the afternoon or tomorrow, even when we talk about the school activities at the age of 6 or 7 or 15, it looks totally different from country to country. Some countries at the age of already 5 or 6, children are sitting in front of the blackboards or whatever, tables and chairs and notebooks, and they are having very academic type of learning, whereas some other countries, up to the very higher level of education, throughout the primary schools and even including secondary schools, they use more of the play-based learning or activities which requires lots of projects or requires lots of discovery, not necessarily staying in the classrooms, but go out and learn from the experiences. So obviously, the attention span or concentration span of children might differ depending on what kind of teaching schools propose and what kind of learning students are engaged in. So if, for example, you look at different available international data, and again, if I cite the work that OECD is doing, PISA, we also look into the kind of teaching and learning strategies that schools are using. For example, some education systems use more of the memorization type of activity so that students surely gain some knowledge and an understanding important and foundational pieces to continue the learning, whereas some countries are using more of the learning and activities and strategies which require students to get involved in more complex problem-solving activities, work in team, work on long-term projects, challenge each other, rather than just memorizing the facts. So this is just, illustration of two contrasts of different teaching and learning styles, but you might need to also think about keeping in mind the science of learning and development of children, what could be the appropriate ways to introduce in terms of the teaching in schools, and how we could not only, I'm not saying one or the other, but how we could design the teaching, taking into account the advantage of different ways of teaching, different ways of learning. So I stop this, but I'm open for any other questions later.
Bien, usted señala que no se puede tomar cada país como si fuera igual a otro. Esto es lo que ha señalado el ministro de Educación argentino hoy día, que la educación depende de factores sociales, políticos, económicos, que diferencian a un país de otro, y usted ha agregado que eso incluye lo que yo llamaba el span of attention, porque no es igual de una cultura a otra. Ahora, cuando uno toma ciertas, que son las materias que toma el PISA para analizar, y excluyamos lo que es lectura y comprensión de texto, no hay matemáticas locales ni física local. Estas son materias universales que, por supuesto, pueden enseñarse de maneras distintas, pero en definitiva no hay una diferencia en las materias. Puede haber mayor tiempo para aprender, pero en este aspecto yo le quería preguntar a usted, hemos hablado con usted sobre el modo de fomentar la creatividad en el aula y estamos hablando de la educación formal. ¿A qué edad debe iniciarse el niño en la escuela? No me refiero a la preescolar, sino a la escuela propiamente dicha. ¿Y qué son las primeras cosas que debe aprender? Por ejemplo, ¿debe empezar aprendiendo matemáticas a través de juegos, nociones elementales, por supuesto, de matemáticas? ¿Cómo debería ser el inicio de la educación formal?
Thank you. Could you please prepare my presentation, please? I guess we don't, anyone doesn't know the right, only right, one right answer. I guess every country has choose their own way. In Estonian, actually, this magic age is 7. And yes, believes that 7 is quite good for us. But what I would like to know, it's the second presentation, please. Yeah. Okay. Forward, please. It's the same. So, next. Sorry. Okay, now. Something is wrong. Okay, doesn't matter. No. I don't use it. Something is wrong there. Okay, it doesn't matter. So, as I told, 7 is it's compulsory age for our children, but in our perspective is that more essential is what happened, what is going on before the school. And in Estonian kindergarten or nursery schools, it doesn't matter what kind of name we use, actually is really educational institution, not a social institution. This means that kindergarten we have a national curriculum for the kindergarten, and every kindergarten has to compose own curriculum, which should be in generally based on the national curriculum. Then it depends on what kind of teachers we have as a preschool. In Estonia, for instance, they have to have a bachelor degree. Almost of them actually have a master degree. So this means that before the school, our children are quite well prepared for the school, firstly. Secondly, what I would like to, and you know, everyone knows that it's very essential in preschool explains the problematic areas of child and take into account her or his weaknesses to offer the improvement plan. So, and once again, 7 is a magic age, but what is going after when child goes to school? What kind curriculum we have? What kinds of teachers we have? Supportive systems, and also I mean how our teachers are able to adapt the teaching to the children's needs. So, and regarding the mass, as I mentioned that in Estonia we have the national curriculum, and by national curriculum for the kindergartens and national curriculum for the basic schools or primary schools, we use the post name, and upper secondary school as well. And once again, would like to emphasize that every school composes their own curriculum. This means they have to take into account students' needs of this school area. They have to take into account own resources, human resources, teachers' resources, I mean, even support teachers' resources as well. Once again, they have to take they have to take into account the different aspect, how to promote students' learning and teaching as well. And very often, if people asked us from us that why Estonia is quite good PISA results, I have to say that we have a lot of pieces, and every piece actually gives their own benefit. And I can't point out that, okay, we have the wonderful curriculum, we have the wonderful teachers, we have the supportive system, or we have the wonderful hobby activities. Every piece gives their own benefit. Here is the point. And then you can achieve something hopefully good. And maths is in kindergarten, in preschool curriculum, we have 6 topics where kindergarten has to develop students' abilities, music, art, mother tongue, maths, etc. It's 6 different physical areas, 6 different topics. And yes, maths is one of them. It's quite essential, of course, and I guess how to teach or how to teach children before the school, I mean in kindergarten, then I guess through the play. Different kinds of playful activities, this is essential. And if you can show the very strong link between the real life, because children, they don't live isolated. They live with us every day after the kindergarten, after the school. They go at home, and they listen to very carefully what parents are saying and what is the main conversations. And I guess it's numbers and even salaries or taxes. It's a quite common topic in each home. And once again, it's quite easy to link the everyday life with different topics, and especially the math. And we know that actually the math develops the logical thinking, and it gives main fundament for the learning the other subject as well. Yep.
Ay, supongo que la respuesta no será muy diferente, pero me interesa saber porque hay aspectos particulares en la enseñanza del lenguaje. ¿A qué edad también debería comenzar la enseñanza de idiomas?
How to say? I'm so old that I can compare. I can compare how I learned language, foreign languages. First language was Russian and second English. We started, was, I don't know, it's maybe around 40 or even 50, okay, I don't exactly remember that. But yes, if I compare the teaching methods with previous time, the methods have changed, absolutely. And what is the right age? In Estonian, as far as I remember, the first foreign language is taught third grade. This means students in age 10. Second foreign language is coming fifth grade. Then students 13 age. And but it depends on the school, and also time I emphasize that in Estonian schools are very independent. They are they have a quite huge autonomy, and even in the school curriculum, they can change the time when we start. At some of schools start age 9, and some of schools start in age 10. Depends absolutely schools. Because national curriculum gives a general view. They said that, for instance, in Estonia we have basic school or this primary school consists of 3 stages, which each of them consists of 3 grades. First grades, first, second, and third grades. So, and each school can make the changes when they start the different languages, including the foreign language. But normally, first foreign language comes comes third grade, and the second foreign language comes fifth grade. It's very, very typical for Estonians. But nowadays, of course, quite common that even kindergartens offer language courses, small language courses. Of course, it's a very through the play they teach. They just give a general understanding, and I guess children they enjoy this kind of activities. But not maybe it's common more in the cities, not the rural areas. But and depend on the parents. Sometimes the parents have to pay for that if the additional course which begins earlier than the regular lessons at school. Yeah.
Yuri, usted nos explicó que lo que importa es la eficiencia en definitiva, cuál es el resultado que se obtiene con el mismo número de tiempo, por ejemplo, con la misma cantidad de tiempo. Y Supongo que eso no depende solamente del tiempo, sino de la cantidad de materias que queremos enseñar. Cuánto conocimiento debemos incorporar en el niño, porque eso también, por supuesto, tiene que ver con la duración en la enseñanza de cada materia y el tiempo disponible y la eficiencia.
This is a very important question, and many countries, especially recently, are asking the questions to themselves in terms of the design of teaching and learning. So to what extent you should cover different learning contents into curriculum, and to what extent they use the time to either expand the area of knowledge to transmit to children, or the learning that they have to have, or the depths of the learning, how they could go deeper into the understanding and the use of the knowledge that they will gain. So probably from that point of view, I might comment in terms of the challenges that countries are facing for the curriculum design. And actually I mentioned this because the OECD not only assessing the results of the learning, but we are working with many countries and in collaboration with UNESCO, especially IBE, to better understand how countries should consider the emerging needs and the context of children and how they could rethink the curriculum. Of course, it depends on the countries and the priorities, what learning contents they want to cover. But the common challenges that many countries are facing today is that the world is growing and the societies and economies are growing and changing, and there's always new things to add, or new things that teachers, parents, and the societies expect children to learn, in addition to the things that old generation people have learned in the past. For example, now the fashionable thing in the education debate is whether we should include the computational thinking in curriculum, for example. Or do we include more of the ICT skills? Or nowadays we are talking about sustainable development, and the awareness and understanding and skills to deal with the climate change is important. So should we create a new subject called environment science or environment literacy? This is just an example, but policymakers, and especially those who guide the design of the teachings, are facing this important challenge: what new things you should accommodate, or how you could make sure to include the most important things to be covered by teaching. But of course, if you add some new things, you have to maybe cut something else, or some other traditional teaching might not be relevant in today's world. So one important areas of discussion is to identify actually what are the core learnings over time across countries, important foundational knowledge, skills that young people need to learn. And that's actually very center of the discussions of international assessments like PISA or other assessments, because we try to understand what is important to be monitored regardless of the curriculum contents of different countries, and what children, young people, needs to develop to make sure that not only understanding that contents area at the given age, but they have this baggage of knowledge or skills that they need to pursue their future. If they want to continue the academic careers, or if they want to prepare their future life in a labor force, they should have some core skills that is important. Then you might ask, what are these important skills that should be part of the curriculum? And of course, that's debatable. But some areas are emerging. Of course, there are some basic understanding of, for example, mathematical reasoning or basic understanding of the use of the language, reading, writing, communication skills, or basic understanding of the scientific facts, but also how you could use the scientific way of investigating the phenomena so that you can apply that in problem solving. But emerging discussion is rather in the area of more social and emotional skills. People are agreeing, and I think that's wherever you are, that purpose of education is not only giving children something to know, but also to prepare young people so that they can pursue their future, they can build a future, and they can be an active, effective citizens, workers, members of the societies. Then these areas of more social and emotional dimensions of learning are attracting more attention of policymakers. For example, Ambassador mentioned especially the learning of young children, the age of 5, 6, 7. We are now discussing with some of the countries who wants to get deeper into the understanding of what are the important learning for the age of 5. Then the ideas come up from that discussion is that, of course, some basic foundational skills like notion of language, notion of numbers, space, so not necessarily mathematics at the age of 5, not necessarily the literature or reading at the age of 5, but the foundational understanding to start learning reading at the probably bigger age, or the concept of numbers, space, or dimensions. That is very important. But also in the area of social and emotional dimensions, some competencies are proven important because without that, it is also difficult at the older age to develop other more complex social-emotional skills. One is, for example, the capacity to give trust to the others, because it's important in the learning, but also in any other activities in the societies to work with others, to collaborate with others, and especially in the future age, as it is anticipated, we have more and more of the benefit of technologies, and robots and artificial intelligence could do many of the things. But at the same time, that's why human beings need to also bring our own values, and one of the things is to collaborate with others, understand how others are feeling and thinking, but how I am thinking and feeling, and put together the ideas or confront each other to come up with the new ideas or connect the dots to create and innovate. So that is coming out as an important, and at the age of 5, 6, 7, it is demonstrated that the sense of trust, to trust others, and to be a trustful member of the community is very, very important. And that is difficult, it's not visible, but it is discussed that many high-performing country policymakers would like to make it explicit as part of the important learning at the age of even preschool. I hope that answers your question.
Usted menciona que, bueno, en los modernos currículos debe incluirse habilidades, el desarrollo sustentable, medio ambiente, pero a la vez es necesario, por supuesto, el estudio de las cosas universales, como las matemáticas y el lenguaje, y por supuesto, cuando se le da más importancia a algo, se le da menos importancia a lo otro, y por supuesto, usted me va a decir que las cosas varían según las necesidades, las posibilidades y las características de cada país, pero en términos generales, ¿Dónde cree usted que debería estar el estrés, el énfasis en la formación del niño en la etapa primaria?
Interesting but not easy question. Well, OECD is not in the position to tell what should be the emphasis. That is really depend on the priorities and the expectation of each countries. And also I'm interested in seeing more of the recent examples of the curriculum reforms, for example, in Japan or Finland, maybe Estonia. These countries are also revisiting their curriculum and trying to answer to your questions so that they identify the most important pieces of learning. But priorities are not, from our perspectives, based on what we do in terms of the data collection and analysis, is that the question is not identifying what are the topics which are becoming important, but what are the underpinning important competencies which are actually included in different emerging areas of learning. For example, I mentioned awareness and literacy to understand the climate issues for the Sustainable Development Goals. It is not about knowing more about what's happening in the planet. That's important, that's one of the learning, but probably underpinning important competence which could be developed through the learning of climate change and which could be integrated, not necessarily creating a new subject, but it could be integrated in the learning of science or social studies or arts or physical education is, for example, the development of the sense of belongings or the skills to ask critical questions or skills to investigate, to challenge the tests and find the methodologies to prove your ideas or argue. So that kind of skills could be applicable not only for example, the climate change, but many other emerging issues. Another important areas which is transversal is probably the skills to learn to learn. Learning to learn, because students at any age is important not only absorb what students can hear from teachers, could experience from teachers, but they need also to develop the foundations to design their own learning, know and understand how they could learn, and how they could address the challenges, learning challenges that they might have. And this could be becoming more important because now the environment of the learning is also changing. It's no longer the traditional two-way learning. Teachers teach, students learn. But students today and tomorrow have much wider opportunities of learning in schools, outside of schools, with teachers, but somebody who are not teachers, from peers, through the web of connections, through the internet, through different materials which are now more and more accessible to anybody who are connected. So what is becoming important is, of course, to benefit from these resources and learn what you need to learn, but also to create your own learning, knowing how you could learn. But this doesn't exclude, as you mentioned, some important basic learning skills. For example, that's why mathematics could stay important in the coming years despite all these changes, because mathematical thinking, critical thinking that we can learn through mathematical problem solving could be continuously important. But very often the question that we don't ask is what is no longer relevant. Very difficult to drop off what your students are learning today, although you know that the change is happening. So I would like to also see some debates in countries whether they are having this discussion in terms of the new development, but also what are old enough or not relevant in the current context, and maybe revising how they teach or how they design the content of the teaching.
Gracias. En el primer panel hemos aprendido que la relación memoria-experiencia es la de una interrelación, no la de una opción, de una alternativa. Paula Koshnakova decía fuera del micrófono que en verdad la conclusión es que todo tiene que ver con todo. Y eso es lo que en definitiva estamos aprendiendo sobre en qué consiste la educación. Tiene que ver también con lo que decía Yuri, y ella señalaba que lo importante, más allá de esa discusión que se mantiene en muchos países, si hay que aumentar las horas de clase, si hay que disminuir las horas de clase, cuál es el número suficiente de clases, ella señalaba que lo importante es la eficiencia. Cuánto conocimiento podemos, si pudiera medirse así, cuánto conocimiento podemos incorporar al niño por hora y no cuántas horas dedicamos a esto si no hay la eficiencia necesaria. Y por último, ha señalado que la enseñanza es de 2 vías, pero que hoy día esas 2 vías no se limitan a la relación maestro-alumno, sino que hay una educación extraescolar que proviene de los distintos medios de comunicación. Y esto nos plantea cuál es el rol del maestro hoy día, cuáles son las capacidades que debe tener, cuáles son los métodos que debe emplear, cuáles son los objetivos que debe perseguir, y esto es lo que vamos a tratar en el próximo panel. Muchas gracias.